right. Well, Kent, welcome to the Play Inspired podcast. As mentioned earlier, here we talk about your experience when it comes to examining your life, how you've evolved as a human. And so, having said that, give us a little bit of an intro. Give us a little bit of a sneak peek inside Kent's life.
Well, first, thank you, Judith, for having me. I appreciate you reaching out and Happy New Year. Yeah. Um, the the language that I would put to describe my life is simply fully human,
Mm,
meaning, um, like everyone, uh, we have ways of being and attributes about ourselves that are gifts and truly, we shine. We all have our unique genius and special ways of contributing to the world.
mm,
Simultaneously, we also have shadow. We also have unskillful, unwholesome, more animal-like parts of ourselves that are also part of who we are. And that's the part where fully human comes into place, is what my experience has been in my life, largely as leading the HR and people practices for large industry leading organizations, is that most of us don't like to look at or don't look at the shadow side of ourselves.
mm. Yeah.
And that's where so much of our understanding of self, understanding of where our suffering comes from, our unnecessary suffering comes from, where our stuckness comes from. And so I've built a career and a life out of examining my own fullness in its totality so that I can become more able to hold space with and for others in their full expression without judgment or condemnation or any righteousness. And
Mm,
so I move through the world as an agent of human evolution for myself, for my family, for my friends and colleagues who I work with. And how do we all become more honoring and loving and kind and fully human to ourselves and others?
mm. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that, we all go through life, we have these goggles on or of whatever we picked up throughout the years. And then one day it's just we just kind of wake up and we start examining things and we understand that we are our own biggest blocker, I think would be the right word. So what were the events? What led you to explore this human side of you, like the shadow part of you?
Yeah. So, I've just always been, as a kid, growing up through school, I've always been completely fascinated by what it means to be human in all of our different expressions. As a competitive athlete, as a musician, as a son, as a brother, as a friend, as a parent, as all these different expressions that we have. And I was, as you mentioned, we follow and move our lives forward based on what we were given from our families and cultures of origin, the time we were born, the location we were born, the family we were born into. All of those cultural givens is what our source code becomes. And so as we move through our life, most people, unbeknownst to ourselves, are actually not authentic. We're not speaking from our own experience. We're more often a mask of the collective consciousness that's speaking through us. And so what that ended up for me was I followed all the scripts. Do well in school, be a good athlete, be a good friend, be a good person, work hard, you'll achieve, you'll be happy, you'll be successful. And I did all that. And I've had a lot of abundance in my life. I've had a lot of privilege in my life. I've had a lot of success by those terms in my life. And even with all those accomplishments and achievements, there was a hollow emptiness and a growing sense of not being enough, because everything I would accomplish, thinking like, oh, when I accomplish this, when I make this much money, when I have this kind of job, when I have this kind of house, when I have this kind of moniker of success, surely this void inside me will be filled up if I achieve enough things.
Mm,
and that just wasn't the case. I had achieved pretty much everything I had set my heart's desire towards, and there was still lots of anxiety, depression growing in, not enoughness, and a questioning of like what's actually going on here. And so I noticed I was drinking too much. I noticed I was working too much. I noticed I was distracting myself, staying busy, seeking something out there that I thought would fill me up. And until I actually said, "Oh my gosh, everything is inside me that I want and need," and like once I started doing my own inner work, like with deep rigor, and I would say this is 12 years ago now, 13 years ago now, I started peeling back all of the shoulds and ought tos that I'd given myself or had been given to me by others, and exploring all my neuroses, all the patterns and adaptive strategies that I employ to try to feel okay or safe or be liked or feel enough or be wanted or belong. And I realized that all those strategies were just that. They were characters I was playing. It wasn't really me. And so as I summoned the courage to actually really look at myself in totality and honor and forgive and respect both the light and goodness and the unsavory parts that we all have, that there's a experience of really coming home.
Yeah.
And left avoiding all of the neuroses and all of the unhealthy patterns or strategies that we employ to move through life. We just continue to promote more unnecessary suffering for ourselves and for others.
Yeah.
So it was that moment of I'll never be satiated thinking that it has to be something out here that I have to like get or become or achieve.
Yeah.
And is this making any sense?
Oh yeah, no, I get that because I was the same thing. I did this everything. Went to school, got a great job, got my dream job. I was on track to the position that I was aiming. But then the longer I stayed in that position, the more I hated myself. I hated my life. But on the outside, it's like, oh my goodness, it's perfect. She's 26 years old and she's at this level. No one's done that before. It's too. I was too busy trying to look good for others that I actually look bad in my own eyes.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah. I love the way you said that, Judith, is like trying to look good for others creates pretense, which is a lack of authenticity, a lack of who I actually really am, because I'm pretending that I have to like put all this stuff out there to be enough, to be liked, to be wanted. And that's part of the human condition. So when we can relax all that stuff and let go of that pretense of the show and just be ourselves, already enough as we were born, right? And always already enough. And there was something when you said worrying about how good I look. There's a body of research that comes from Harvard. Bob Keegan, who's the head of the developmental psychology department at Harvard, and really the grandfather of adult development, which is a whole new understanding of how we continue to grow and learn into our adulthood. For many years, until about 40, 50 years ago, it was thought that you're grown up when you hit 18 or 21 and you have a fixed view and you have a fixed personality and you have a fixed identity and you have a fixed path in life. And the last 50 years have proven, well, that's not true. We can continue to grow and develop if we intentionally practice. And so in his book, Deliberately Developmental Organizations, he's looking at companies. And in this one story, he talks about a CEO having a conversation with their chief operating officer who was getting a reputation for like nice guy, but never really getting the job done when it counted. And the CEO asked him a question. Are you more interested in how good you look or how fast you're learning?
Yeah.
And so that moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm more occupied trying to look good than I am interested in what I'm actually learning and how I'm growing and continuing to develop as a human being. I'm trying to keep in place this shiny veneer of perfection, which just isn't real.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what I found is, like you've been doing the work for a while. I've been doing it for about 2 or 3 years now, so fairly new to the whole study of it. And so what I found is over the last year is actually forgiving myself for
Mm,
behaving that way. I
yeah,
still hold myself to a certain standard of I can't believe you did that. Why were you, oh, such wasted time. Oh, such this and that. Oh, like, and another thing that really disappointed me is that the work never stops. I thought it's like in school,
right.
you solve for X and then there you go. The problem is done. But the work never stops. I could be 60 years old, examining my life for the last 50 or so years. The work is
Yes.
still to be
It
done.
continues to unfold
Yeah.
layer after layer after layer
Hmm.
in what we've been through and then letting go. And I love your forgiveness practice. That's an incredibly powerful
Mm.
practice.
Yeah.
Because why would we rail against ourselves? Like I think about this sometimes when I notice I'm being really harsh towards myself for something I did, 10, 20, 30 years ago. I'm like, why would I be mad when it was the mind and eyes of a child that actually made that decision?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, I didn't know any better. I didn't know what I didn't know. I was working with the information I had. I was, right. So, like, to continue to shame ourselves and berate ourselves for the steps we've taken is not it's not useful,
No.
right? It only makes things worse. So I love hearing, and forgiveness has been a huge part of my practice as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's something I
it
read.
continues to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I read something in an article about a few months ago that said the human mind isn't completely developed until the age of 25. And
Hmm.
so you're right, like why was I so mad at what I was doing at 24? I know society says I've been an adult for a few years now, but my mind is still technically working its way to be fully developed. So whatever I did, I'm whatever I did then, like you said, it's technically a child. So you should go easy on yourself when it comes to that.
Totally. And then
Yeah.
if we look at the collectivity of where consciousness is in humanity, as the 8 billion people on the planet, in evolutionary terms, the human species is actually in its late teenager years.
Mm.
If you look at the way we express ourselves, particularly in the United States, we run around and have run around for the last 300 years like we're invincible and can do whatever we want to anyone in the planet without any sense of repercussion.
Yeah.
And now we look at our presidency, we look at the ecology, we look at the environment, we look at the wealth gap, we look at the racial inequalities, we look at all of the systemic illness and pathology that is rampant in our human expression. And that is very akin to a reckless teenager who thinks they're invincible and doesn't care about any consequences of their actions. That is you look at the United States right now. Like that is us. Look at who's the president of our country. He is a child
Yeah. I
in
get
his
that.
expression and he is simply the embodiment of the collective shadow of our country.
Yeah. See,
I mean that
I haven't even thought of that. I always sit here and analyze everything that's happening around me. I'm like, why is everyone so focused on the short-term gains? Why is
correct.
no one
Because
thinking
we're
about,
children, because no one's
yeah,
developed past the
yeah,
child mindset. And there's again, I'll point to Keegan's work at Harvard. In developmental psychology, there are clear levels of development, stages, much like early childhood development, where we go from newborn to infant to toddler to young child to teenager. These are all vertical stages of development where we can take expanded perspectives, we can hold more ambiguity and uncertainty, we can hold more complexity, and the current expression of the United States and most of humanity is just that. It's like I'm interested in short term me, get my needs met,
Hmm.
and there's not yet a collective consciousness that subscribes to an adult, mature approach that understands. Richard Rohr, who's in his 80s now, I think he's been a Franciscan monk for 40 plus years, and he speaks about this concept of deep time. And when we mature, we actually understand how to live in deep time, and our immediate gratification needs, which fuels all addiction, all impulse, all pathology. When we can live in deep time, we have respect and an honoring of where we've come from as a species, and we have respect and consideration for the multitude of generations that we are leasing this planet from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we can arrive at a operating system, at a maturity where we can live in deep time, and we're no longer chasing, I need to be liked, I need to be enough, I need my itch scratched right away. We can show up more skillfully and more healthily for ourselves and for the people that matter most to us.
Absolutely.
And set that as the model for future generations. Not, it's all about me, pay me now.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's something that I see. Okay, so let's talk about your work a little bit because that's a really good segue to it. Because I really, when I was still working corporate, I see this all the time. It's about me. It's about me. I gotta kiss the boss's ass so I could so I could save my own ass.
Yeah.
And so so how does someone become fully human at work? Because we walk around, with these goggles on that, oh, this
Yeah.
person is that way, or that person's that way. If I just keep doing this. So we're pretty much sleepwalking
Yes.
through our careers under
Yes.
the guise of I'm working so hard.
Yes.
So how do you start becoming more present in the workplace while at the same time battling this mindset of it's a dog eat dog world out there?
Yeah. That's the work. That's the exact inquiry that everybody needs to be in.
Mm.
And I don't have the answer other than at some point in time you felt something shift inside you that had you said earlier, like I had this awakening of sorts. Like, oh shit, like the paradigm that I've been subscribed to actually doesn't make sense to me anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
And in those moments, it's like I've made that distinction, and now I get to choose. So in this developmental psychology progression, Keegan he labels it, we move from the socialized mind, which is where I am simply, if we think about AI, like I'm simply an artificial intelligence who's executing someone else's rule base that I've been given. My parents programmed me a certain way, my teachers programmed me a certain way, society programmed me a certain way, and I'm simply running those scripts. When I have this awakening and I realize, like, wait a second, what I'm actually under the influence isn't mine. I am fulfilling upon someone else's wanting or desire that I was given to think that I need to want this too. And so when we move from the socialized mind and have this awakening, the next stage of development is called the self-authoring mind, where I'm able to, in any given moment, make the distinction. What am I under the influence of? As things are coming up inside of me and things are coming at me from the exterior, how would I choose to respond versus unconsciously and habitually just reacting to any emotions that I have or what anyone is saying or doing outside of me? So when we begin to pay attention in a different way and can make those distinctions around what am I under the influence of? Am I under the influence of someone else's rule base, or am I actually consciously choosing?
Mm.
That's where the work really begins.
Mm.
Making that distinction.
Yeah.
And then having the courage to get to know myself more fully
Yeah.
and say, who am I really? Absent what my parents told me I need to be, absent what my teachers told me I need to be, absent what social media, the news, all these external influences, how do I parse those out from my own lived experience based on what I believe of my own authorship?
Yeah. Wow.
And that's a pivotal moment in our development that very few human beings on the planet have ever made.
Mm. That's awesome.
Because most
Yeah.
people are hanging out just running in the matrix,
Yeah. Pretty
in the
much.
dog
Yeah.
eat dog world that you were describing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because
And
that's what I was
in
just told it has to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're all going through, like I say, it's the collective mindset, and we were
Correct.
part of it until we slowly walked away. And
Yes.
so one of the biggest myths out there is if I just work hard and face down, work my face off, then I'll be just fine. But what I've experienced is that I actually end up shooting myself in the foot in the long run doing that. So how is working hard, like, because we've
Yeah.
been raised thinking that way, so how is it actually end up hurting us in the long run?
Yeah. So working hard is a move that I'm really familiar with in my own experience. And it's a move that I'm really familiar with in all the coaching work I do with people because it's the move, as you just said, that we were conditioned to make.
Mm.
And at some point in time, as we work hard, and I'm not poo-pooing hard work. I think part of a successful life is having rigor and discipline and perseverance and stick-to-itiveness and resiliency. And those are all hard things. So this isn't a pass on hard work. What it is that when I reach a certain level in my life, there's a certain amount of complexity, there's a certain amount of uncertainty and volatility and ambiguity that working harder doesn't solve. And if I try to solve all those things, because that's me, working harder is a move made primarily to control all the externalities that are coming at me. I can control the traffic, I can control my clients, I can control my partner, I can control my kids, I can control the weather, I can control all these things. And if I just work hard enough, I can control all the stuff that's coming at me. And eventually you will exhaust yourself and burn out and get really sick. And that happened to me.
Yeah.
And so the next move is, how do I know myself more fully, say no more often, and choose how and where and when I exercise the appropriate quality of effort, not quantity. So it moves from a quantity of effort or an intensity of effort to an inquiry and an expression of the quality of my effort. So it brings on a more mature level of discernment. And what I end up doing is I know myself. I know what I love. I know what I don't love. I know what brings me fully alive. I know what sucks the life out of me. And I have the courage and conviction to organize myself in my life such that I'm spending more of my waking hours, more of my attention, and more of my efforts in the things that I both love and that I'm skillful at and that I want to continue to learn and grow in. And then it becomes more of accessing flow states than actually trying to work harder. The way Alan Watts, if you know, do you know who Alan Watts is?
I've heard of him, but
Yeah, so he was a philosopher, back in the 60s, 70s, student of world religions and psychology, brilliant teacher, studied with masters. And the way he speaks to this is it's the difference between sailing and rowing.
yeah.
When we're rowing and we're efforting, we're trying to compel the water and the wind and the currents and everything on earth to go the way I want things to go. When I'm sailing, I say, oh, here's how things are going. And I orient my sails to capture the wind and move with what's going. And I'm not exhausting myself trying to compel all the externalities to my preferences. Right? So I understand how to sail my ship through the continuous stream of uncertainty and volatility and complexity and ambiguity that's coming. And I've let go of my need to control and be attached to things being a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And I'm
wonderful.
more attuned to who I'm committed to being in the world. And the outcomes will take care of themselves. So I go from what's my practice set so that I'm getting enough sleep, I'm getting enough water, I'm getting enough food, I'm getting exercise, I'm moving, I am well resourced so that I can meet all of the uncertainties and challenges that are inevitably going to come my way with ease and grace and flow and skillful means, rather than raging against the world not being it the way I want it to be.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, wow. That's actually I've never thought that because that's one of the biggest things that I continue to grapple with is letting go of the control and just trusting, like let the process work itself out. That's one of the things that I still continue to grapple with. And so as soon as you said, it's like rowing and sailing, I'm like, "Oh, I get it
Right.
now."
Yeah.
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 So in one way, we're trying to force outcomes to be to our wishes. And the
Mm.
other way is we're dancing and moving with what is so. We're
Mm.
not pretending that it's not. We're not pretending what it is.
Yeah.
We're not trying to compel and manipulate other people towards our preferences. We know what our preferences are, and we understand that, guess what? It's not all about me.
Mm. Yeah.
And so Richard Barrett speaks to, who's the inventor of the Barrett values systems, as he's speaking to this particular evolutionary dynamic within human species. He says it this way: there exists only self-interest. What changes is our definition of self.
Mm.
So I go from being a me monster to being with thou, and I see myself in you and I see you in me, and so I am now, you are me, and so my sense of self is now the collective. It's not Kent.
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah.
shift from of self-interest and being all about me to my sense of self being human.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, what's a question that you wish more people asked when it comes to being fully human at work?
Am I?
Am I?
Am I fully human at work?
Mm.
Am I fully present? Am I fully engaged? Am I aware, fully aware of my view, the way I see things? Am I fully aware of that the way that I see things actually gives rise to the way I think about things? Am I aware that the way I think about things gives rise to the way I talk about things? Am I aware that the way I talk about things gives rise to the actions I see that I can take or not?
Mm.
Am I fully aware of the consequences of my thoughts, my views, my thoughts, my words, and my actions in space, through space and time? And am I okay with the consequences of the impact of my way of seeing things, my way of thinking about things, my way of talking about things, and the actions I take, the effort I put forward? Is my life working? And I tend to invite people to think about these in three main categories, like marriages. And this is, I'm borrowing from David White, who I teach to his work. And he wrote a beautiful book called The Three Marriages. And he speaks about these marriages as lifelong, enduring commitments that most human lives consist of. And the first marriage is our marriage to ourself. Who I am, who I'm becoming, who I'm letting die so that I can become the next expression of a life where I'm going to continue to mature and continue to develop and continue to contribute in ways that are different than what I did when I was 10 or 20 or 30 or 40. So I lost my train of thought for a second. This is the question. Am I fully, to what extent, right? And you said this earlier, this developmental process, or this waking up process, doesn't really have an end. So how fully awake and aware am I that I am actually the cause of my life being exactly the way it is?
Hmm.
And I'm done blaming other people for my life being the way it is.
Yeah.
Now I'm taking full responsibility for my humanness and the wake that I leave in the world, in my family, with my friends, with my colleagues, in my community. Because every thought that I have, every word that I speak, every action that I take ripples through the
Yeah.
entirety of existence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking for when I'm working with people and organizations. Is like how awake and aware are we of what we're under the influence of and the consequences of our way of being in the world, and are we okay with those? And if
Yeah.
we're not, are we willing to change?
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, I just couldn't stop thinking that when you ask yourself the, and I could be, correct me if I'm wrong, but um, just asking myself those questions, am I fully human? Am I fully present? All that good stuff. Right now, I could say I would actually take the time to really think about it. Am I really? Am I really? But it's so easy to just keep saying yes to all that, like you're checking off things at the
Right. And
dock.
then I would say, how do I
Right?
know? How are you
Yeah.
checking? How are you checking? How
Yeah.
are you making the determination of presence?
Yeah. So
And
I
for
know.
me, that question is, I'm not
Yeah.
triggered. I'm not triggering myself,
Yeah.
and I can meet whatever is arising inside me, and I can meet whatever is arising outside of me with openness and curiosity.
Hmm.
And I don't have anything to promote. I don't have anything to defend. I don't have
Hmm.
anything to fear. I'm just an actual living conversation
Yeah.
between what's going on inside me and what's happening outside of me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, wow. Yeah, I'm just sitting here floored. So, yeah. So
That's
one
what
final,
it
yeah.
is.
Yeah. So one final question here. So say, let's get imaginative for a little bit. I have sprinkle some magic on the microphone on the computer right now. And whatever you say, can be, everyone can hear, right? And when I say hear, not hear, but really hear, you can peer whatever you say can pierce through all the layers, all the goggles, everything, and they can actually really, really understand. So, having said that, what would be your advice to them? What would you say to them?
Hmm. Um, hmm. The language that's the language that's showing up for me right now and is continuing to stay there is uh, advice that I got from the CEO of the Container Store,
Hmm.
Kip Tyndall. Do you know the Container Store? Do you know this organization? They sell all kinds of containers, like
Yes.
storage stuff, right? So he said, mind your wake.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's what I would pass along is my wake, right? Like I'm moving through life and there's a stream behind, like there's an impression that I'm making as I move through the world and I move through my life. What are the consequences and rippling effects of the way I'm moving through life? And am I okay with those?
Yeah.
For myself, for the people that matter most, and to be really oriented around my wake relative to my impact on humans, on people,
Hmm. Yeah.
on life. And am I acting more as an agent? Am I doing more good than harm in conversation? Am I acting in a way that's taking myself and others along a path of possibilities and healing and coming together? Or am I acting as an agent of divisiveness and pathology and sickness?
Hmm. Yeah.
And then adjust accordingly so that your wake
Mhm.
is more than.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, Kent, I'd like to acknowledge you for the stand that you are, for, being present, like bringing this work. to in front of as many people as you can and helping them really see and really be present instead of just sleepwalking through life and calling it a life when all they do really is sleepwalk. Anyway, so I acknowledge you for that and thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for the acknowledgement.
Yeah.
I appreciate being seen that way, and thank you for the good work you're doing too. You know, the world unfolds. The worlds we inhabit are created through words, through
Hmm.
conversation. So
Yeah.
I deeply appreciate you offering a platform and a conversation for us to wade into, so we can learn more about ourselves and one another, and how
Hmm.
we can be more fully human in our respective lives for the people that matter most to us. So thank you as well. And I want to acknowledge you for the good work you're doing in the world by hosting and holding these kinds of conversations, Judith.
Mm, thanks. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is the best way our listeners could get in touch with you?
Yeah. Our website is fullyhumanatwork.com. Um, my personal email is connect at fullyhumanatwork.com or
Mhm.
Kent at fullyhumanatwork.com. I also have a personal website that's kenthfrazier.com, um, which speaks to a different expression that I have in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming in and hanging out with us. We appreciate you. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Judith. I
Yeah.
appreciate you too.